How to screen tenants as a first-time landlord. Hey folks, my name is Chris at Hauseit, based here in Miami, Florida. Today we're going to talk about this topic that has often been asked to us by first-time home buyers. Perhaps they bought their first apartment or house. They're looking to maybe rent it out for now. And they've never been a landlord before or screened tenants, and they often ask us for tips on how to do it, whether we can help with that. And today we're going to go over some basic tips. There's always lots of ways to go around it, but the first step is to always check for credit. And this is something that's allowed no matter which state you're in to ask for the tenant's credit. It's a very standard piece of diligence information, and it's something that you should never under any circumstances forgo. And sometimes you might be renting to an acquaintance or a friend or someone who's very persuasive and says, hey, listen, I've got good credit, I've got a job, like maybe here's something I can show you on my phone, and like that's good enough. I'm not comfortable sharing with sensitive financial info or whatever their excuses. Definitely don't buy into it. As a diligent landlord, you absolutely always have to check their credit and take a good look at their credit report. The fortunate thing is it's much easier these days to do because instead of having to go through a credit check agency, have them pull a hard credit check against the person's score, ask for their social security number to get the credit report and on all this stuff. I mean, it's much easier these days because what you can do is you can use any a service, for example, at any of the major credit rating agencies like TransUnion, for example. TransUnion SmartMove is an example where essentially you go to one of these credit agencies, you go to this product, and you can essentially either you pay or you ask that the tenant pays, but you basically have this credit agency, in this example TransUnion SmartMove. SmartMove is their product for this credit check service. You have TransUnion send them an email, so all you need is the tenant's name and email, and then the tenant can just basically pay, or you pay, and approve for TransUnion to share the credit report with you, the landlord. This is very smooth because you don't even have to ask the tenant for their social security number. Might be awkward, and people think it's very sensitive and such. So you don't even need to ask that. You just need their email address, and then you get a verified copy of their credit report and other types of reports as well that you can opt for directly from the credit rating agency. In this example of TransUnion SmartMove, you can pay a bit more as well. It's all very affordable, but you can pay a bit more for not just a basic check, but to see the sort of the whole credit report. And also they might have add-ons such as criminal reports, housing court reports and such. Keep in mind, in some states like New York, it is actually illegal per new laws set in 2019 to look at housing court records. So you can't see whether a tenant has been in housing court before. It's illegal now in 2019 in New York. In Florida, there's no such things. But just keep in mind that there are nuances depending on the state on what you're allowed to do. But anyway, this is one very easy way to do it. It'll be saved on your account if you have one. So it's a very affordable way. I mean, the cost is under $50. It can vary obviously by the agency, but it's generally pretty affordable. So you can do that. One tip though for this is make sure that you, for example, if you were to use TransUnion SmartMove, you would need to log on to your account and then set up the property first, and then you can invite the tenant to do it. You don't want to have the tenant sign up and try to somehow invite you. You definitely need to set up the property first, and this way you can avoid maybe having to do it twice and pay twice. The next important diligence item is references, and This is very important to take a look at landlord references. I mean, there's a very good quote by a former customer of ours who's a smaller time landlord. And she says, you can often tell because the references are so important. If they treat one landlord well, they'll probably treat you well. And, the vice versa is true as well. If they treat poorly one landlord, then, perhaps there's no guarantee that they will treat you well either. So landlord references are very important. We totally understand that there's situations where maybe the landlord is not nice or something and it's not the person's fault, but generally it's very important to have good references. Someone who can speak to where they've lived before. Ideally they've perhaps lived and been stable for a few years in their previous place or past couple places, and you can ideally not just email but perhaps even speak with the landlord and just get a sense of like, hey, first of all, obviously, did they always pay rent on time? Were there any issues with payment? Did they damage the property? Were they nice? Did they take care of the property and not cause lots of property damage? Were they clean, whatever, just basic diligence items. Another diligence item you might want to consider asking is their source of income or assets. In most states, this is reasonable and allowed. In certain states like New York, you got to be a bit more careful. You're not allowed to, and there's no way to sort of verify these, so you have to watch out for your own liability because source of income is a protected sort of class source of income. So you obviously this is to protect people who might be on like housing vouchers and stuff. So you can't discriminate on providing housing based on source of income. So it's something you got to be careful of. But in most other states, it's reasonable and of course like probably sensible to ask how, if they have a job, what kind of job they have, essentially whether they can cover your rent. Obviously for most landlords this is a very reasonable and important thing to find out. Obviously the last thing you want is for someone to rent your apartment and not be able to afford the rent in a couple months because they don't have a reliable source of income. So this is in most states, this is something that you have no problems with being able to ask. And in all states, in New York, for example, and anywhere there are condos, really, in New York, for example, condos and co-ops, the building's going to have an application anywhere where it won't be you, but it'll be the building asking like a whole plethora of questions as well. Who they are, employment history, even like reference names and stuff. Sometimes buildings might even ask for, especially co-ops, might ask for like reference letters and such, from personal, professional reference letters, landlord, employer reference letters, the whole gamut. So sometimes if you are in a condo or co-op building, they might you might have access through the management company that purchase application to begin with, and that's going to be very very informative as well. Now, keep in mind, it might not be a good idea to rely entirely on that, because if the building has some sort of lease application, some sort of building application, that often is submitted and filled out after you have a signed lease contract. So it'll be too late for you in terms of pre-screening, which is why it's important to do some of this diligence yourself prior to signing a lease. Another interesting thing that landlords like to do is they like to perhaps meet the tenant. If they have an agent doing the showings and such, perhaps they like to do like a video or phone call, after the tenant has already seen the property with the agent, just to find out who they are and get a sense of, who they are, whether you think they would be a good tenant or not. Again, this is subjective and can be quite tricky. You got to watch out in some jurisdictions, because in New York, there's lots of protections for tenants, and you don't want to potentially be in a situation where, hey, like you might be, the tenant might claim, hey, they were rejected for housing because you met them or had an interview with them and then you discriminated against them. This type of stuff is impossible to prove, but you do have to protect yourself. So obviously follow the regulations based in your state. In other states like Florida, you can obviously meet your potential tenant. I mean, this is an important transaction and there's no prohibition against that. With that said, there are perhaps some exceptions to this. For example, regardless of which state you're in, if you're using one of our do-it-yourself listing services, you're going to meet obviously the prospective buyer or tenant. So especially if you're doing the showings yourself for a flat fee, there won't be an agent doing it for you. So obviously, naturally, you would meet all of the people who are viewing your apartment anyway. But again, be careful with that. But assuming that you have no issues with interviewing or meeting the prospective tenant, we often find that that is a tried and true method as well. A lot of landlords insist on doing it just because they want to get a sense very quickly whether the tenant's going to be a good match, a nice person, professional. Again, this is all subjective, which is why it can be quite dangerous in some jurisdictions. But so a lot of landlords trust their gut and their instinct when it comes to things like this. Just make sure it's not, it's not subjective or discriminatory, obviously. So there you have it. My name is Chris at Hauseit. We hope you found some of these tips helpful. Leave us a comment below, hit like or subscribe. We appreciate it. We can answer some more detailed questions as well about the process, about other tips and such if you ask us a question below. And of course, if you're looking to buy or sell in New York or Florida, we cover all 5 boroughs of New York City, Long Island, the Hudson Valley. We're based here in Miami-Dade County today. We cover Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beach, Martin, and St. Lucie counties. We can help you save 6% when you sell with an agent-assisted FSBO listing service. And of course, when you buy, we can give you 2/3 of the buyer broker commission back at closing, subject to us keeping a minimum of 1% or $7,500 as of this filming. That can be quite a bit of money because oftentimes new construction units in, for example, Miami, even in New York, will offer 5, 6, 7 or more % in commission to buyers brokers. So 2/3 of that can more than cover your closing costs. My name is Chris at Hauseit, and we'll see you on the next one.